Thank you, Leslie. It was beautiful. What lovely words to Danny Boy. I'm sure you recognized the tune. The lesson this morning is living in the light. Hello. Ever try to put a microphone on jewelry? It's really noisy. But if I hold you, you little mutt, you're going to be noisy, I know. Okay, we'll do it this way. The book of Genesis says, "Let there be light. And the light he called day, and there was evening and morning, one day." Now the sun and moon had not been created yet, and some folks thought that God made a really big mistake right off the bat. I mean, come on. Created light, and then somewhere down the road we create the sun and moon. Didn't sound right to people. But what was a day? It says evening and morning was one day. This is the day, evening to morning, in which creation happened. This is the light in which creation happened. You know, somebody gave me an old Nikon SLR camera, the old kind where you had to have the film developed and so forth. But I could sit that camera in a completely dark room and open the lens and take a picture. And when it was developed, you could see everything in the room, because there is never complete darkness. There is always light, just like there is always God. So obviously this one day didn't mean sunshine, daylight, but life-giving light. And one of my favorite cosmologists was Dr. Brian Swim. And we heard him years ago at the Unity Convention, and I bought 12 hours of his lectures just to hear him go through the whole cosmos. It's fantastic. And there's one little part in there that I just dearly loved. And that was the story of the chlorophyll molecule. So let's just have a little fantasy story about the chlorophyll molecule. It was green, so the other molecules wouldn't come and play. And so it was all by itself. And it was always looking up into the light of the cosmos, and there was ultraviolet light and all different rays of light. It was beautiful. And then it saw one pure white band of light. Very narrow, but there it was. And it was the only band of light that could produce life. And so the little molecule said, if I could just get that band of light to come through me, I'd be very popular. And so this little molecule began to move itself around a little bit, trying to reform itself and shift and change, just on trying to catch this ray of white light. And at one point, suddenly it happened. That light came through that little chlorophyll molecule and is responsible for all life on Earth. Oh my. Now, of course, I gave a lot of characterizations to that little molecule, but such as it is. Somehow the molecule made that decision, and we don't know how that happens. But here we are. And we're not too unlike that molecule. Not too unlike it. For we're always looking for the perfect adjustment in consciousness to, that sounds like rain, doesn't it? All I have to do is talk about green molecules and life and so forth, and it rains. Thank you. All right. No. But we're always adjusting ourselves, adjusting our consciousness, trying to catch that perfect Christ light coming through us that we know that Jesus had. And of course, we're at a different level of creation than the molecule was, but it's the same principle. And so we study truth principles, and this helps. But I know people who have sat in unity churches and listened to this teaching for 30 years and never got it. Just could not make that adjustment. And so we have to make the adjustments within our thinking and until we step into that Christ light and eventually learn how to stay there. There's a wonderful woman named Nona Brooks. And Nona Brooks and her sister were very, very ill, and their mother as well. And Nona and her sister heard about this teacher and decided to go to this teacher's class. Sounds a little like Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, doesn't it? When Myrtle was so ill and they went to this class and heard a teacher. Well, Nona Brooks and her sister did kind of the same thing. And when they got to this class, the teacher taught about light. And they thought, well, that's fascinating. So the next week they decided to go back and see what else this teacher had to say. Well, they went to the class. And lo and behold, the teacher again, for the whole hour and a half, taught about light. Well, they were a little puzzled, but still it was fascinating. So they went back to the third class, and sure enough, the teacher taught about light. So Nona started to decide that maybe there was something more to this than she was seeing. And so she went home and decided to meditate on light. And she would meditate on light so often, and pretty soon, in the middle of her meditation, it seemed like her whole body and her mind were filled with light, and then the whole room was filled with light. And so she drew her sister and her mother's names into her meditation, as well as her own, and eventually she was healed, her sister and her mother were healed. And when people heard about this, they came and asked Nona to pray for them. And so she would. And she would just take their name and sit there in meditation until the light just filled her whole being. And when it did, she knew that the healing had taken place. And sure enough, it had taken place. So Nona continued on to create what we now know as the Church of Divine Science. Started it in Denver, Colorado, and she had a school there, and one of her students went to San Francisco and started the School of Divine Science there. But it was all about light. Some people resist the light. There was Moses. And when God called Moses and he was standing in front of the burning bush and God said, I'm going to send you to Egypt to talk to Pharaoh, he said, no. You can't do that. I don't know what to say. I stutter, and they won't even know what I'm talking about. What God am I talking about? And so Moses was like, no, I can't do this. And God said, well, I will send Aaron with you. And I will put my words in you, and you will put my words in Aaron, and he will hear the words as if they are the words of God. And so, little by little, that started to break through for Moses, and he began to perform the miracles that God told him to do. And there was another one who resisted the light, and it's a well-known story, and that's Jonah. And God says, I just want you to take a nice 3-day walk to Nineveh, preach to Nineveh, save the city for me. Jonah looked around. He saw a ship down at the shore, and he made a beeline for that ship, got on that ship. It was going to the farthest port he could think of. And out on the sea, there was a terrible storm came up, just tossing that ship everywhere. And the sailors, who understood pleasing the gods and displeasing the gods, and they said, who displeased their God? Jonah says, I did. Just throw me overboard. And so they did. They threw him overboard, and this fish swallowed him. And he was in the belly of that fish until the fish spewed him up on the shore exactly where he started. How many times have we done that? We get the message to do something, there's a phone call we need to make, and so for days we think, no, I'm not going to make that phone call, it's going to turn out bad, I'm not going to do this. And finally, we give up, we make the phone call, and the person on the other end of the line is thrilled to hear us. My God, I've been waiting for you to call, I'm so glad you called. And the call goes well, and we're sitting there after the call thinking, well, for heaven's sake, why did I wait so long? And this is kind of what Jonah did. He was on that shore, and he says, okay, I will go to Nineveh. I don't speak their language. They'll probably kill me at the gates, but I'll go. And so, thank you. I think that was an affirmation. All right. So Jonah started out on this 3-day walk. And when he got to Nineveh, they threw open the gates of the city and said, we're so glad you're here. We've been waiting for you. Come in and preach to us and save us. And it was a huge success. Was Jonah happy? No. Jonah left the city, went up onto a hill, and sat down to sulk. He was angry. He was disgusted. So God, feeling a little sorry for him, sitting there in the blazing sun, just grew this nice big gourd plant over him to shade him. And Jonah was still mad, so God took it away. And finally, God said to Jonah, do you do well to be angry? And that's the end of the story. We are left with that cliffhanger. Living in the dark, how is this working for you? Well, we have to answer that question for ourselves. We have to look around and say, this thinking about lack and limitation just is not working for me. In fact, it is working for me. I've got more poverty than I've ever had in my life. Well, yes, because where your mind is focused, that power of God comes through your predominant thinking to manifest in your life exactly what you're thinking about. And so we have to make that choice to come out of the dark into the light. It requires learning to live in the light. And when I first started into ministry, it was 1986, and I was in Columbia, Missouri. And one morning, I don't know what I was dreaming, but I woke up, and I was just absolutely in love with everything, everybody. I was just floating in this love, and it was so wonderful. And I thought, wow, I made it. And poof, it was gone. Okay. That's not how you respond to the light, like, yeah, I made it. Nope, okay. So I thought about that for some months, and it happened again. I woke up in the morning, and I was just in this incredible place of love. It was glorious, and this time I was a little smarter. I just laid there and just focused on it, just let it hold me, love me, and then I finally slipped quietly out of bed, slowly pulled on my robe, and just kept moving like that. And it stayed until 11 o'clock that morning when the phone rang, and that'll do it. But it just taught me something. 1986, that's a few years ago, and I still remember it so clearly, because that's where I learned I needed to learn how to stay in the light for as long as I could. And how to remain in the light, not by possessing it, but by staying aware. It was a lesson in choosing to be where it lives. And William Blake wrote a poem, and he knew this too, and the poem is very short, and it goes like this. He who holds to himself a joy doth the winged thing destroy. And he who kisses a joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. I've got that taped on my locker door at Silent Unity. Kiss the joy as it flies. Just stay there in that consciousness. And don't try to grab onto it, but just let it carry you. We're in the light when we have a sense of quiet joy. Outside of the light is outside of joy. Joy is a state of gladness that lives in us regardless of outer circumstances. It's just that sense of joy, that sense of light, that sense of love that I was experiencing so long ago. How can we stay in gladness when life has its ups and downs? Well, life has its ups and downs because our thinking has its ups and downs. You know, we're doing well one day, and I can remember being happy about something, and my grandmother would say, well, just watch out. Just watch out. And so whenever I was in gladness, I thought, I better watch out. Boom. And where did my thinking go? Right down to that other place. And it just goes up and down, and we're taught that. And so we're needing to learn to keep our thinking on that plane no matter what happens. I remember coming home from church one Sunday in Columbia, and I was just feeling dragged out. I couldn't figure it out. My energy was going down, 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 down. And I thought I should just go to bed, but what if my energy doesn't stop going down? And it was a little scary. And I thought, I'll just go and lay on the couch for a while. And this man in my church had given me this videotape to watch, and I needed to give it back to him. And so I thought, well, I will just put that in the player and watch it. Well, the video was from Kripalu. Kripalu, it was a guru. And you know what that guru was talking about, the state of mind, you know, and all of the things that we teach. And I'm laying there on that couch, just starting to listen to this. And through that hour, my energy came up and up and up. And by the end of that videotape, I was up off that couch, fixing dinner, cleaning up the apartment, and just feeling great. And I stopped in the middle of the kitchen and I said, Carole, it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. Because nothing changed in me except my thinking. We are human and we're divine. No matter what happens, emotions, sorrow, there is always that part of us that can stay in the light, if we will. You know, when Lazarus died, Jesus, it said he waited 4 days so that people would know that it was God doing the work. No, I don't agree with that. He waited 4 days because he had trained Mary and Martha and the other disciples to do what he did. And he was waiting for them to do it, to heal Lazarus, because they could. But they got so involved in fear and sorrow that they didn't do it. So when he came and held them in his arms, he wept with them. And so then he needed to go to Lazarus' tomb. And on the way to Lazarus' tomb, he stood there and he said, thank you, God, that you always hear me and you always answer. Lazarus, come forth. And again, the writer of the Bible said, he said this so that everybody would know it was God doing the work. No. He affirmed this to get out of that sorrow that he experienced with Mary and Martha, get back into the light so that he could do what he needed to do, which was call Lazarus forth. Ow. That makes a little more sense to me. That when we need to do that holy work, we need to be in that place. And yes, God does the work, and we already know that. We already know that. Living in the light is a journey of discovery. And we step into the light and that light band that awaits for us. We've just adjusted ourselves to stay in that. And when something else comes along, we don't adjust ourselves to whatever happened over here. We stay in that adjustment that carries the light band through us. And whatever is happening over here, Dr. Frederick Keeler said, our job is to look upon and to bless, not to get over there into it. And so we stay in that light. We look upon and we bless. We learn the difference between light and dark, joy and despair. And we adjust and adjust our consciousness until we continually bring that Christ light through us into everything that we do. And that's what creates eternal life. It creates the spiritual body that the Apostle Paul said. He said, if we have a physical body, we have a spiritual body. And we are to rise up into the head of Christ. We're to rise up into that consciousness and create that spiritual body, which is our eternal life. In Ephesians 5:8. For once you were darkness. Now notice it doesn't say you were in darkness, it says you were darkness. But now in the Lord you are light. Live as children of the light. The fruit of the light is all that is good and right and true. Remember Jack Boland in Detroit used to say, I am prosperity, I am light, I am health. And he always used that I am statement. And so we live as children of the light because we are light. And we keep affirming that and stay in that place. And you will receive life-giving light that waits for you. Learn to live in the light forever and ever. And obviously, the chlorophyll molecule is still living in that light because we're still here. And it is Christ in you, your assurance of glory. God bless you.